All right, I'm here with Casey Smurthwaite. Casey, thanks for joining me here on the podcast, especially here on the YouTube channel where I like to do my videos. And really, this one is interesting because you're not an athletic director who I usually have on the podcast, but I'm trying something new. I stumbled upon a lot of your work about you also seem to study AD openings. I'm not the only one. You seem to put more thought into it than the local beat reporter that just says whoever they can think of that's either on staff or is a known alum or a football coach. And so I just kind of thought we'd kind of go through. But first, just thanks for joining me, man.
Hey, absolutely, Travis. And I'm glad that there's other people out there that enjoy it. It's a game within the game, and it's so different rather than maybe even head coaching openings in professional sports for a sports team or your local insurance rep, looking for a vacancy. We're not studying that, but it's something that we can talk about and rally around. So thanks for having me on, Travis.
Yeah, and you're with athletics admin, and so we'll talk about that too. But so for those that are aware, I mean, or not aware, but I keep a hiring trends tracker on my website that I always put the updated date on there. And so I was going to read from that just to kind of set the context of the show. So since 2020, there have been 238 D1 AD hires at 206 different universities. So obviously there's some that have had two, there's a couple that have had three, and for better or for worse. Then right now we have 19 athletic director openings as of August 8th. So we've got, I'll run through the list real quick and we'll talk about a few. At the power schools, we have Cal, which they've have co-ADs for the year, but I still consider that open. And then we have Oklahoma, who I consider that open. They now have a search committee formed, and they've got a long runway. But then we have our other FBS, Delaware, New Mexico State, Ohio now with Julie Cromer going to LSU. We have South Florida, Troy, UL Monroe, and then Utah State. For SCS, we got Austin Peay State with their AD just going to Marshall. We've got Bucknell, Cal Poly, Gardner-Webb, South Carolina State, Southern Utah. And then our basketball schools, we have CSUN, CSU Northridge, New Orleans, UC Riverside with their AD leaving for South Carolina to be a deputy AD, and then UC San Diego. So 19, and we're recording this on August 11th, the afternoon. The D1 ticker's already come out for the day here on the East Coast, so I don't suspect anyone else is going to make any earth-shattering hires. But what do you think about there being 19 this close to the school year starting?
It's a bit of an outlier. However, I will say I think it's going to become more of a trend more than anything. And I know you broke it down from FBS to FCS. And in the next 18 to 24 months, I wouldn't even be surprised if there's that third level that falls in within there. But there's very interesting aspects to each of those jobs. I'm sure at some point, maybe there's another time we talk about it, but there's a big difference between pro sports and collegiate athletics. And I'm not saying one is better than the other. I'm not saying candidates are better than the other, but they're just very different. But the trend, as you have noted, there is a different type of a trend happening. And I think that's also coming in the form of timing of hiring athletic directors. But, even the last couple, that come to my mind is Oklahoma, to even UC Riverside. There's that trend of sitting ADs now becoming, a number two or a number three. And I look at even college football over the last 5 years. You have head coaches at Group of Five schools that then become coordinators at Power Four schools. So I think that trend's now shifting. You're also adding in the professional sports aspect. And one thing that's of note is Oklahoma could have easily just gone out and hired somebody right away, but they're taking their time a little bit. Now, I will also add in here for our fans who are listening in, and again, thank you for listening in, is there are some corresponding moves already with the contract extension of somebody who'd already been contacted about that Oklahoma opening. It's also very interesting to compare where these vacancies are and who's getting a contract extension, because you can also kind of draw the line or put on your tin hat, however you want to look at it. But there are a lot of openings and there's some really good jobs out there.
Yeah, and like Ren Baker got extended, I think, right? And he's got some Oklahoma background, and so obviously he's known as like a fundraiser and everything. He's got now the one of my favorite two presidents in the country, Michael Benson there. And so I think those two are going to do great things. And so West Virginia fans can rest assured. You talked about, so I put out this video 2 or 3 weeks ago of like just introducing my AD tracker. And I said, I'm not going to update the video every time. But at the time, I had made a note that there wasn't that many sitting ADs that had left to become ADs somewhere or to be deputies somewhere else. I said, we think this happens all the time. And about a week later, it happened four or five times. And so, just for some stats out there, since 2020, 16 D1 athletic directors have left to become a deputy AD somewhere else. 12 of those were to power schools. Two have now returned to the AD, and that was Ed Scott at Memphis and Tommy McClellan at Rice. And I had heard that he had went to Vanderbilt for maybe a personal reason too, there for his family, but I don't know all the details about that. But since I recorded that video, Sabo went to Maryland. Brent Jones went from Troy to Georgia Tech. Wes Mallett went from South Carolina, or went from UC Riverside to South Carolina, and then now Julie Cromer goes to LSU. And so it's kind of interesting. It's like I say, this isn't. We think this happens all the time. Now it kind of feels like it is happening all the time.
And I don't think it's going to end. I
I
think
think well,
there's
yeah, we're gonna have more domino effects, right? Don't you think?
absolutely. And with Utah State going at warp speed, I would bet a lot of money that a sitting AD or former AD gets that job. And just even based off of the Marshall search, there were, I think, out of the five finalists, four out of the five were sitting ADs. And I don't know what's going on if there's something in the water at MAC schools, but it seems like there's a lot of MAC ADs that are looking elsewhere. I mean, Julie just left, but there's a lot of finalists or final 10 or second and third round interviews with MAC ADs right now. So I don't know if there's something going on in the MAC water. I think we could make some really good guesses right now in this new era. But I think this is going to be a trend moving forward, at least for the next 2 or 3 years. And then that trend's going to change and it's going to be something different.
Yeah, and I mean, the Marshall one was interesting because they had put out, or College AD, I think, had reported that several, like the four sitting ADs or whatever, and one Power Four executive, um, uh, was basically on campus interviewing. And I was like, I don't really believe that that was on campus. That's really risky for be a sitting AD to go voluntarily. So maybe it was somewhere like near campus. I had made the prediction that I thought maybe it could be Kelly Zinn, and that got me on kind of the radar. I was like, wait, when the Rutgers search fell off, I said Kelly Zinn could go to Rutgers,
Mhm.
and obviously she did because of the presidential tie. And I think a trend of this is and I want to ask you to comment on this about what you look for in a when you're writing up like your because you blog about it your search party. So first thing I used to work for a president in the Big Ten. I'm a higher education doctorate student, and I think about university governments and presidents. A lot of these openings have presidential openings or new president changes that might be a reason someone's looking to leave or someone hasn't been hired yet because some of these searches are on delay. I think New Orleans is on the delay because the institution's struggling so bad, but financially. But a lot of these are because there's no president in place, and you kind of want your president to make the hire. So, what do you look for whenever you're kind of evaluating some of these? Maybe talk about a couple that you have done recently and which ones you have coming down, and we can talk about those searches.
Absolutely. Well, I think those are great questions, all wrapped into a wonderful bow of you don't know what you don't know. And that can be applied to the president, specifically with their hiring of an athletic director. They're now a tandem duo because athletics is now such a front porch, the Scott Barnes saying of a university that's now become kind of that universal cliche. They are tied together. It's just like an NFL GM who gets their head coach, who then gets their quarterback. It's the same format. When you get one that's a little bit out of alignment or off the timeline in the multiverse of athletic directors, it throws off everything. For Diana's case going to Maryland, Diana had President Cantwell, who left after 18 months to go to Washington State. From everything that I've gathered and everything I've been told, Diana and Elizabeth were very close, and President Cantwell and Diana, they knew where they wanted to go, they knew how to operate, and Diana had a long leash. Not saying that's good or bad. I actually think it's good, but there's two sides to every story. But all of a sudden, when you make a change of who you're reporting to in a power position from an athletic director to a president, as you know, you've worked in the president's office, all of a sudden everything that might have been assumed or we're on the same page, I have the autonomy to make that decision, goes away. It now becomes, hey, what should we do about X, Y, and Z? And the interim role is very difficult to do, and especially for a university president in this day and age, sprinkle on some NIL revenue share era. This is a critical time. So I'm very curious on like a Utah State aspect that they're going again warps. What's that going to look like? You have seen over the last year, sometimes university will speed up a presidential search to kind of line up with the athletic director search. You hire a president and there's already 10 finalists. So, okay, president, you can choose out of the 10 who you want, or if you have somebody else that you want, you can do that. But they're setting up the calendars to be different. And I think in a way you set them up to be failures. I mean, I don't think that maybe it's more of a fail instead of a failure, but ideally, in a perfect world, you have a president that hires the AD, and the AD hires their basketball coach and football coach. And things that I kind of look for that second part of the question is, the president. Is there a sitting president? How long has that president been there? And two, where is that department? Is it in a flex of like a Texas State that might be moving on? Is it like a Cal State Northridge that has a vacancy, but there's also some, maybe let's call it compliance academic, complications to it right now that make AD hire right now more in the future? Is it, a University of New Orleans that it's, I mean, they have a lot more problems on their plate. And it's those type of questions where you can start to see the timeline. Are they using a search firm or not? And then pulling, straight from, both public records and also, an extra points library or a win AD or whatever people use, and starting to compare the finances and seeing where the positives are, where the negatives are, seeing when their facilities were last done, seeing if the advancement office is centralized or decentralized, that plays a part in it. And basically at their head football and head basketball coach, what's their contract look like? What type of candidates are they trying to be or try to attract? Is it a basketball school? Is it a football school? And those are some of the questions that I start to formulate. And then I, will send off to my contacts, working 13, 14 years in collegiate athletics. I still have my contacts, even interviewing some of these athletic directors. I can just shoot a text off and say, hey, give me your thoughts on this, or help me clarify or track down this piece of information. And from there, I gather it in. And I don't necessarily go out and say names explicitly, but I want to paint a picture to show this is who the candidate they might be looking for, and this is why. And of all those reasons I've just said, it's fun, it's exciting, and I think it's only going to get sped up from here on out for the next couple of years for these searches.
Yeah, I remember when I looked at my prediction and then a recap of the Georgia Tech hiring Ryan Alpert. I had thought that President Cabrera would stick to his same game plan. So I was right in that aspect. He basically got the same route that he did with Jay Batt. He went and got a top number two because Jay Batt came from Alabama. And I had thought that, like I had predicted Tiffany Grimes, I think, from if it was going to be that direction, it made sense because I also look at where people come from. And so Tiffany Grimes is working at Purdue. She is a Purdue alum, but then, everyone thought she'd be the next Mike Bobinski. Bobinski then signs a contract extension with the new president. So, but the other interesting thing was, well, she had also come from Alabama. She worked with Jay Batt. So all of a sudden, she knows the previous AD at Georgia Tech, the previous two ADs at Georgia Tech. She'd worked with both of them, and she probably wanted that job. And then I heard that she was, a finalist. But the Ryan Alper one made so much sense because he's pretty much the same background as what Jay Batt did at Alabama. And so I think if you study presidents and their selection, so what I'm doing is, did this president ever hire an athletic director before, or is it like their first time? Because he had hired ADs at George Mason, but that's a little different than at Georgia Tech because of football and just being a power school. But you talked about like the president's stability. I mean, we're talking about Delaware has an interim president. Uh, the Gardner Webb does. I mean, I just can't even think about how many of these right now have interim presidents, but that is a big part of it too. And you and I, we both look at some of these openings, but what are the ones that you're any predictions of like a position profile of some of the ones you're going to be looking at?
I'll stick with the Utah State sitting AD or former AD. I think Cal State Northridge, I think, is going to go for somebody that's, I think, a profile is a little bit more of an internal person, not necessarily an external. Yeah, fundraising's great and wonderful, but I think that there's some things they need to that work out right now. From a New Mexico State standpoint, a new president that came in. I want to say it was you probably know better within the last year. Well, actually, the last 6 months. I think they're going to go very much an external, somebody who has ties out west, because as an institution, they would rather be more associated with the Mountain West or a Pac-12 version 2.0 than necessarily Conference USA or even maybe Sun Belt. So I think that's kind of the profiles that you look at. I think that again, there's great jobs. A ULM, newer president. That's going to be one that I'm really curious about because I know there's a lot of smoke about FCS as a Pioneer Football League, and then it's a board of trustees saying, "No, we're staying here." I'm really curious because you're going to see what direction that athletic department's going to go with that next hire, and then
Yeah.
interim being Coach V, and then you start to ask even more questions. But that's the industry that we're in right now. I think you nailed it perfectly. Look at the president, look at what they've done before, and there's going to be tea leaves that are going to point you at least in the right direction. And
Well,
I
look
think
at Monroe and UC Riverside. Those presidents have both been on the job like less than a month, I think, before they have to start making an AD hire. And I had thought that when Monroe one came out, okay, maybe this means he's leaving to go back to Troy as the AD, or going to LSU as the number two. And it doesn't look like, obviously, it wasn't LSU. I guess he could be in the mix of Troy, but I assume Troy's probably just gonna appoint I think it's Kyle George, the deputy. Basically, is their president's been there like 20 years. Same president that hired Brent Jones from internal. It worked out great for Brent Jones. So this internal, why wouldn't you just do it the same? Because it's not broke, don't fix it. That's the
correct.
other thing I look at is how did it go? Like, yes, they may have moved on, but maybe they moved on because you know Jones had been the AD like 6 or 7 years. Nothing was wrong, so we did this. And so that's one comment. The other kind of comment I'll end on about that is when I was in Indiana State, we knew we had a president outgoing, and they made a decision to not renew the athletic director mid-year. And so before the president search was going to take longer, they wanted the board, I think, wanted the president to hire the athletic director, but we were told that they were going to start the athletic director process with the search firm and then basically come up with a finalist by the time they kind of set it up where within like I had left right before this, but the idea was get it to like 4 to 10 people, I think, and then the new president will have a list, and then they will be able to be involved in the interviews without having to slow everything down because that would cause a huge traffic jam of who your AD is going to be. And I think that's probably what some of these schools are going to be doing. But the other option is, are people going to do what Utah State did? You would know this. Like, I'm not sure, is it just Sandy Barber or is it Sandy Barber and Huron? Which does that mean you're getting help, from Dr. White too? And then basically, how long are they going to be a part of Utah State? But we have so many retiring athletic directors that if they could, you look at Gene Smith, he's going to Maryland for a while for like a 6 month term. That might be the next thing instead of hiring an interim is let's go get some of these experts that can help us get stable and then they could just help you find someone. You wouldn't even have to pay a search firm. You might just end up paying, I know Huron is a consulting firm, but like that could be another approach too.
No, and then I think that is a great approach that needs to be studied more. And can you just buy time to get a Gene Smith or somebody like Sandy Barber? And the interesting aspect is Huron is going to be there for another, on paper, 5 weeks. The RFP closed on Thursday. Everything I've been told for 2.5 weeks is that CSA actually will do the search at Utah State. And so Huron will be there to help in the transition. But I will say The timeline, though, if you're already saying, hey, the president's probably going to be hired in January, why don't you just keep Huron on for another 3 months? I mean, is it really going to be that big of a deal to have an AD in if you have Huron there? Because you essentially have somebody calling the shots in Sandy who's been there, done that. So I think that could be a trend. I think it'd be a very wise trend. But at the end of the day, the president needs to have their say, or else you're setting them up, in my opinion, to fail.
Yeah, well, CSA, I mean, they do this level of search all the time. They've got a few active ones right now, and so I'm sure they'll do great with it.
They
But
do a
yeah,
great job.
and it'll be interesting. But we're gonna cap it here. But I want to, kind of explain to and you're not. This isn't a sponsored post or anything, but like I asked you to come on. I had just kind of stumbled on athletics admin. So what do you guys do there, and kind of how's it going?
Well, one, again, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. And two, I got to give a shout out to Hero Sports, who they're the ones who actually said, "Hey, would you mind writing?" And it's kind of expanded a little bit into some of these more business, financial, athletic director vacancies that have been wonderful. I enjoy writing them. I also enjoy reaching out to some of my colleagues that I used to have and just kind of ask those questions. But athletics admin is a group of consultants that we work in higher ed and specifically within collegiate athletics. We want to be that affordable, contracted employee that if they have a vacancy in sports information marketing or revenue generation, that we can be a plug and play fill in, kind of like a Huron, but at a much more of a micro level, all the way to handling some of these third party searches and not necessarily coaching searches, but apparel deals. If
Yeah.
they need somebody who has the contacts, like at Nike, Adidas, Under Armour, you name it, we can come in even if we're already employees or contracted of the university and be able to handle some of those things. Athletic directors have a lot on their plate. There's always a laundry list of task items that they can't get to. And we hope at Athletics Admin with our consulting team, we get some of those laundry list items that have been kind of lingering out there. And it's really varies from, annual fund major gift reimagining to revenue generation projects of, hey, athletics admin, we need to get 75,000 in new revenues, by the end of the year. Come up with some projects with some of our assets and identify them and help us sell them. So, group of consultants to make lives easier for athletic directors and athletic departments is the long story short version of it.
No, it's awesome. I mean, especially as smaller athletic departments have to get thinner with trying to do rev share and everything. That for one might need to just hire you. Two, you might have people looking for work that are experts in certain fields that maybe you guys can expand your portfolio a bit. So, well, Casey, thanks for coming on talking about AD openings. We'll have to maybe we'll have a recurring thing if we keep getting if this number doesn't dwindle down. We can do a prediction show. I did a thought piece on right before the Stanford selection was made. I did like a 20-minute video where I just did like a 1 to 2 minute response to every current AD opening, just so I was kind of bored at the moment, and I was like, well, I'll do this, and then I'll just do a recap, see how I did, at least get the position profile. I'm trying to not to name names as much anymore because then I'll feel bad if I get it wrong. But we'll have to come back on and maybe do another show, talk about some more of your hero sports stuff.
Sounds good, Travis. Thanks again for having me, and I appreciate the great work you're doing. We need more folks like you talking about the fun aspects of this industry.